Picture this. It's the fall of 2002, and for 3 agonizing weeks, the entire Washington, D.C. area is basically held hostage by an invisible threat. We're talking about the Beltway snipers. In this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly what went down during one of the most terrifying, high-stakes periods in modern American law enforcement history. More importantly, we're going to dive into how a massive, incredibly coordinated multi-agency manhunt finally managed to crack what can only be described as the ultimate procedural thriller. The investigative web they spun to catch these guys is absolutely fascinating, so let's jump right in. To really grasp the sheer scale and the stakes of this investigation, we have to start with this number right here, 10. That is how many completely innocent people were randomly gunned down. And we aren't talking about back alley crimes in the dead of night. This was happening right out in the open, in broad daylight. In just a matter of weeks, the DC metro area was turned into this landscape of absolute dread. You had 10 lives lost, 3 others critically injured, all by a phantom who just seemed to strike without reason, without any warning, and incredibly, without leaving a trace. Think about the most mundane everyday activities you do: mowing the lawn, stopping to pump gas, going shopping, or even just sitting outside reading a book. Suddenly, these completely normal, everyday actions carried lethal consequences. That's exactly what paralyzed the region with fear. The randomness itself was the weapon. Absolutely nobody felt safe. And the tragedy even struck at the heart of the investigation itself, when FBI intelligence analyst Linda Franklin was killed by a single bullet while simply leaving a home improvement store with her husband in Virginia. And the pace of these attacks, it was absolutely relentless. This entire nightmare spanned 3 agonizing weeks. It kicked off on October 2nd, when a 55-year-old man was shot crossing a parking lot in Wheaton, Maryland. By 10 o'clock the very next morning, 4 more people in Maryland and 1 in D.C. were murdered. 5 murders in a single day, all within just a few miles of each other. This was a rapidly evolving crisis that pushed right through the tragic loss of Linda Franklin on the 14th, all the way to the eventual arrests on the 24th. It demanded an immediate, overwhelming response. Well, that response was completely unprecedented. Montgomery County Police Chief Charles Moose was spearheading the case, and he utilized a specific federal law on serial killings to officially request FBI backup. And man, the FBI answered the call. Within days, they deployed 400 agents from all over the country just to work this one case. You had agents digitally mapping the crime scenes in real time, behavioral analysts working around the clock to draft profiles of the shooter, and massive teams managing dedicated, toll-free tip lines to field calls from a terrified public. It was a literal all-hands-on-deck joint operations center. Now, amidst all this randomness and horror, investigators did start finding deeply chilling clues at the shooting sites. The perpetrators weren't entirely silent, you see. They were communicating. Investigators actually discovered tarot death cards left behind carrying this exact, incredibly arrogant demand written right at the top: "Call me God." It really begs some serious questions about the psychology of these killers, doesn't it? They were directly taunting law enforcement, basically reveling in the power they held over millions of people and operating with an extreme, almost unimaginable level of hubris. But here's the thing about hubris: it usually leads to a mistake. Ironically, the biggest breakthrough in this entire manhunt came from the snipers themselves. On October 17th, that exact same arrogance led to a monumental slip-up. A caller claiming to be the sniper phoned the tip line, and in a bit of an investigative tease, he claimed responsibility for the murder of 2 women during a liquor store robbery down in Montgomery, Alabama, about a month earlier. Now, even though only 1 woman was actually killed in that specific robbery, this arrogant tease was the exact thread investigators so desperately needed to pull. And once they pulled that thread, the dominoes fell incredibly fast. First, they verify the Alabama robbery and fly fingerprint evidence straight up to D.C. By the very next morning, the FBI database matched a fingerprint from a magazine dropped at that Alabama scene to a young man named Lee Boyd Malvo, who had a previous arrest record in Washington state. That arrest record quickly pointed them to a man named John Allen Mohammed. An FBI agent out in Tacoma recognized the name from a totally separate tip, and when they ran it, they uncovered a highly specific vehicle registration. Suddenly, the ghost had a name. Actually, scratch that. 2 names. Now, knowing who they are and having the actual legal authority to take them down are 2 completely different things. This is where an absolutely ingenious legal maneuver comes into play. Working closely with the ATF, the FBI discovered that John Allen Muhammad had an active restraining order to stay away from his ex-wife. Because of that order, his possession of a Bushmaster .223 rifle automatically constituted a federal weapons violation. Boom! That was the exact legal leverage they needed to charge Muhammad. And since Malvo was clearly connected, they jointly obtained a federal material witness warrant for him. The trap was legally set. They just had to physically find them. This whole investigative web ultimately leads to what I'd call a masterstroke. On October 22nd, investigators pinpointed that Muhammad had registered a blue 1990 Chevy Caprice in New Jersey, and they had the exact license plate,
NDA-21Z. Law enforcement immediately broadcast this incredibly specific description and the plate number far and wide to the news media and the public. In a single brilliant stroke, they turned millions of terrified citizens into a massive, highly motivated neighborhood watch looking for one specific car.
And you know what? That dragnet worked flawlessly. The public essentially crowdsourced the capture. Just hours before the final arrest, at about 11:45 p.m. on October 23rd, that dark blue Chevy Caprice with New Jersey plates was spotted parked at a rest stop off Interstate 70 in Maryland. Within the hour, an overwhelming force of law enforcement quietly and meticulously swarmed the scene, setting up this incredibly tight perimeter to ensure there was absolutely no chance of escape.
Then came the final move. At exactly 3:19 the next morning, a highly coordinated joint tactical team, we're talking Maryland State Police, Montgomery County SWAT, and special agents from the FBI's elite hostage rescue team, breached the vehicle. They arrested John Allen Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo without a single struggle. They actually found both suspects fast asleep inside. Just like that, the 3-week reign of terror was over. But when investigators finally got a closer look at that vehicle, what they found was deeply, deeply unsettling. When evidence experts started processing the car, they discovered a terrifying reality. This wasn't just some getaway car, it was basically the murder weapon itself. The vehicle had been meticulously modified into a rolling sniper's nest. The killers had actually removed the sheet metal separating the passenger compartment from the trunk, which allowed the shooter to quietly slip into the back from inside the car. They cut a hidden hole in the trunk right near the license plate so shots could be fired completely from within. This perfectly explained how they vanished from crime scenes so quickly. They were literally never outside the car to begin with.
Taking a closer look at this rolling nest reveals a terrifyingly calculated arsenal. Investigators found the exact Bushmaster .223 caliber rifle used in every single attack, right alongside a sniper scope and a tripod they used to steady their lethal shots. They found the car's owner's manual, which actually contained the physical impressions of one of their demand notes pressed right into the pages. There was a digital voice recorder used to make extortion demands. And, perhaps most chillingly, a stolen laptop filled with meticulous maps of the shooting sites and pre-planned getaway routes. They had planned this nightmare all the way down to the street level.
So, what does this all mean? The Beltway sniper case leaves us with a really profound final thought. How do you balance the sheer fragility of everyday public safety with the monumental coordination required to catch a ghost hiding in plain sight? Think about it. It took 400 federal agents, state-of-the-art databases, behavioral profiling, and millions of vigilant citizens just to stop 2 men in a modified Chevy Caprice. It is a very stark reminder of how quickly our sense of security can be shattered and the immense, united power it takes to put the pieces back together. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a clearer understanding of this incredible historical